Welcome to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Snyder. This week, Akilah Phillips is joining me. She's a registered dietitian with the Philadelphia Phillies. She's actually going to give me a nice cooking lesson. So we're going on location in my kitchen with her. And in the meantime, before we get started, remember, Setanta College is a good place to go for your master's degree, whether it's in sports injury and return to performance management, performance coaching, applied sports biomechanics and movement science, or applied sport and exercise psychology. Go to setantacollege.com to sign up for tuition. Get 10% off with RS10, RS10. All right, on to the show. Okay, I know what you're saying. Where's the cool backdrop if you're watching the video portion of the podcast? Usually Rock's got like a surfboard and skateboard and footballs and Indian clubs in his backdrop. Well, I'm not in my podcast studio today. Instead, I'm in my own home. I'm at my kitchen where I do actually a good deal of the cooking for my family. In fact, I am the cook for the family. So when it comes to dinner and other things, you can find me here because little does anybody know, that's how I put myself through school, whether it's high school or college. I was a line cook. And when I moved out to Santa Cruz, before I started my fitness career, well, you had to make a living somehow, and sure enough, I was a line cook. So I'm back in my element, and with my guest today, Akilah Phillips. She is with the Philadelphia Phillies, as you heard from the intro previous, but she's going to give me a little bit of a cooking lesson on a couple of dishes that she likes to work with or make for her athletes. But before we get underway with cooking, let's find out a little bit more about Akilah. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, Rocky. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you here. This has been honestly something that I've been wanting to do for many seasons now. And I got to thank you for agreeing to be the first one to do this with me, because I've reached out to other professionals, colleagues in your field, and throughout other sports teams. And for whatever reason, it just didn't seem to manifest into a full podcast. So I'm very excited to get this going on. And I'm going to try and do some cool little video, I won't say tricks, but different camera angles. So I feel like I'm in a Martha Stewart kind of home and garden episode, or Food Network, whatever you want to call it. But first, how did you get to be where you are right now? Like, take me through a little bit of your childhood into college, and how did you land with the Phillies?
Yeah, so I guess we can start from the very beginning. So I am born and raised in the Dallas, Texas area. Definitely a Texas girl, born and raised, love it here. And when I graduated college, I went to the University of Houston. I actually got a full academic scholarship. And I originally went in wanting to be a doctor. Previous to like high school, wasn't really interested in like sports or fitness. I think my thought was just like, oh, like you're smart and you want to help people, so be a doctor. And right before I went into college, my older sister actually attended the same college as well and had like older friends, and one of her friends who was in med school already told me, she's like, hey, you should think about majoring in nutrition instead of biochem, because like it's a different perspective on health and doctors really aren't formally trained. I didn't listen because I thought I knew like everything as 18-year-olds do. So after a year of a biochem major, I was like, this is not what I want to do. This is not for me. So I went ahead and took my first intro to nutrition class my sophomore year and fell in love, and completely just opened my eyes to the world of nutrition and health, and like honestly completely changed my life. Like started working out for the first time ever. It was really trying to live a different lifestyle. And through that, like as I kind of continued through college, I still went with the intention of being a doctor, but as I was kind of shadowing doctors and kind of seeing what American healthcare system was like, I realized that I wanted to take more of a proactive approach to helping people's health. And that's when I was like, nutrition could do that. But at that point, I really didn't know a lot of registered dietitians. And I remember my senior year, actually before I took a break to study abroad, I met a sports dietitian. And that just sounded like something that was like really cool. I was like, I've never heard of this before. Like, I don't even know like what that was like a thing you could do. So at that point, to be a kind of, let me segue, to become a dietitian, you have to do a special like certified program like at university. So not every single university has one. You have to do what's called an Ascend program. So once you end the program that I was doing for my major, I was doing like nutritional sciences. So it was a little bit different. So when I went and met with the director of our SN program, like found out what I would need to do if I wanted to become a dietitian. Figured out I was going to have to add about an extra year on to like my undergrad experience. But at that point, I just felt like such a passion for it that I went ahead and switched my last year of college to the Ascend program to become a dietitian. I started working at our athletics department at U of H and with our football team and just fell in love. Like knew for a fact that this is what I wanted to do for a career. So took that extra year, finished my Ascend program, graduated, took a gap year between graduating college and my master's because going into sports, I kind of knew that that was something that I was probably going to have, and also too because I spent my entire college career focusing on medicine. I really didn't have a lot of sports nutrition experience, so took a gap year.
Where did you go? Did you travel anywhere?
No, so at the time I was living in Houston. I was staying with my like elderly grandma, so I was kind of like helping to take care of her. So I kind of did that, and also too, again, kind of going on to the process to become a dietitian. So it's like you do a special like undergraduate program, then you have to apply to what's called a dietetic internship. And at the time when I was applying, by 2024, it was going to be required to have a master's before you can sit for your licensing exam. So at that time, like everyone was starting to do what's called a combined MSDI program. So you would get your master's and do your internship at the same time. So that was kind of the thought that I needed to do is, okay, you need to go ahead and take a year off to like one, be competitive, to apply to a dietetic internship and also find a master's program that you wanted to do. And then it was 2020, so COVID hit. So that also kind of put a little bit of a wrench in my plans. But went ahead and just decided to do a master's. So I applied to Texas Women's University in Denton. So moved back to Dallas with my my mom and my little brother. Started working at a eating disorder clinic because that's something you see in sports dietitian and sports nutrition a lot. So I felt like that was a really good experience to have. And I started my master's in sports nutrition and exercise science. So did that for the next 2 years. And through that process, just started interning at a lot of different like sports nutrition related sites. So I interned at Exos, was able to intern at TCU for when I got into my dietetic internship. And then after when I was at TCU, it's such a long story. When I was at TCU, I met their director at the time, who was a great woman, Brooke Helms. And after I finished my internship and finished my master's, I wasn't working in sports yet. And then I get a call from her one day saying that she was going to OU, University of Oklahoma. And if I wanted a position, it was mine. So quit my job, my full-time job, to take a GA-ship, even though I already had a master's. Did that for a couple of months. And then once I passed my licensing exam, I applied with the Phillies and here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an impressive path. That's great. Okay, so right off the bat, I've got a whole bunch of questions for you.
Yeah.
You just gave me a tremendous amount of content there. So first of all, like when it comes to sports nutrition, what were the big light bulb moments for you in this journey of education? Like what stands out, or when you're looking at sports nutrition from a general common perspective, what are the things that aren't lining up that could be improved upon?
So I guess I'll start with what kind of interested me in sports nutrition. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but growing up was not really into sports, like didn't really care. I've always been kind of like a bookworm. And I didn't really have a very like my mom was very like, we always kind of joke about it. She's very girly. So even when I played like sports as a kid, like it just wasn't really her thing. She didn't really care about it. And I was like, well, she doesn't care about it, I don't care. And then all throughout high school, I just focused on school. So it just wasn't something that I was interested in or ever thought that I would have cared about. And it wasn't until I got to college and I took my first like nutrition class that I was like, oh wow, like, nutrition matters, and like physical health, like your physical activity, those things matter. And then in the process of me trying to be like healthier, I started getting into like weightlifting, like kind of like bodybuilding as training. I started to kind of wanted to learn more about. And I felt like athletes were kind of the best group of people to work with to kind of see that. And then once I started working in athletics and specifically working with football, I saw like how dedicated you have to be an athlete. And I kind of was able to relate it to how dedicated I had to be a student, specifically a student that's in the sciences. And I just had a different appreciation for sports and athletic performance that I just never had before. And that's kind of something that, at least in my opinion, you kind of don't get when you're working with the general population. I would argue that most of the general population kind of thinks like how I used to think. They don't think that fitness and health are as important as it is. So I knew that if I was going to do this as a career, I wanted to work with a group of individuals who valued their health and their performance as much as I do.
The disconnect that you just mentioned is really just mind-boggling. Like people will specifically choose a certain octane level of gasoline to put in their car. They even may have a favorite pumping station or brand of gasoline, but when it comes to their body, the type of fuel that they throw in there, you might as well just throw sugar water in half the time. And how can you expect your engine to be running clean and efficiently? Are you boggled by that as well?
I am, but it is because again, this is such a passion for me, and now that I understand it, like it matters so much to me. But I understand more because of how I thought like growing up and like before I got into sports. And it's like I think one of the things, it's like you could argue that like someone who is not an athlete or is having like health consequences like related to nutrition, like you care more because it's actually their life. But I think people tend to focus more on like what's more immediate and what's in front of them. So typically it's like someone might not take nutrition as serious until they have like an actual like health diagnosis, versus like someone who's an athlete, like if their career is on the line or like they're passionate in one thing, like they're going to do everything they can to protect it. So I think it's just kind of like that disconnect of just kind of you can put things off versus like as an athlete, like you kind of can't do that because you have such a small period of your life where you can be an athlete.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm sure, obviously, and we don't have to get deep into like food addictions and allergies, but I'm sure there's a biochemistry behind that too, in regards to why people choose the food that they do.
For
But
sure.
with your players and the Phillies, what are what's your main focus? What is your fundamental foundation for building your recipes, your meal planning, and all that? And to what capacity, first of all, are you with these players? Are you in the spring training camps? Are you during the season? Are you at the ballpark? What's your role?
Yeah, so when I first got hired on with the Phillies, I really took the job like a big interest. I guess I kind of, in my long story, I didn't explain earlier. One of my biggest interests in nutrition is kind of like injury rehab or like injury prevention. So, because nutrition is really fundamental to that, right? Like a lot of, obviously sometimes like injuries happen, you just can't, there's freaks of accident that happen that you can't prevent. But a lot of times, when someone is injured or someone's not performing well, their nutrition can be a huge factor in that. And something that I saw a lot in college athletics that was like so heartbreaking to me was an athlete getting an injury and then their career's over. Like they lose their scholarship, like they're never able to play again. And that was like finding a way to prevent that or helping someone come back from an injury was something that I started to feel really passionate about when I was in college. So years later, when I interviewed with the Phillies, that's what I told them. I was like, my interest specifically in nutrition is I want to work with either like rehab athletes or I want to work with younger athletes to help them kind of like build up habits and like just give them a really solid like foundation on their nutrition. So with that, my first year, I'm going into my second year with the Phillies. My first year, I worked with our rehab group that's based out of Clearwater, Florida, because that's where my like headquarters are. And I worked with our Dominican Academy. And those are, if you know anything about baseball, when you sign, you can either sign as an international player at 16. So most of our players out of Latin America are signed at like 16 years old. Think about what you knew as a 16-year-old.
Forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a huge foundation or a huge area there of just helping these players develop and like teaching them things. And that's something that was really passionate to me. And then obviously we have really amazing medical staff in the rehab group in a clear facility. So kind of working with these PTs and helping players get back to normal after Tommy Johns and whatever different surgeries they might have was mostly what I focused on during that first year.
Very cool.
Mhm.
Okay. You mentioned like rehab, and I'm thinking, okay, right away in terms of dietary kind of encouragement there, I'm thinking collagen, somehow incorporating collagen into their diet for help of repair of soft tissue. Um, Somehow getting calcium, magnesium into their diet as well, potentially for skeletal health and repair. And then there's also the antioxidants, blueberries. Am I on the right track, or am I completely out there?
No, definitely. You're definitely naming a lot of great things and things we talk about with our athletes. The biggest thing I think that athletes kind of struggle with at all levels is simply just kind of eating enough. And then we're gonna go with like eating and focusing on the best like foods for them. So I think something that a common misconception after someone has surgery or when someone kind of gets shut down from activity because their body is repairing and they feel like they either need to stop eating or they don't do any physical activity at all. So the biggest thing is making sure they're getting enough calories, because when your body is trying to heal itself, like that's what calories are. That's what food is. Like food is, you said it earlier, food is fuel. So making sure your body has enough calories just to be able to repair itself is step number one. And then, so again, not either dramatically reducing your calories because you feel like you're scared that you're going to gain weight, or not sitting home and doing nothing at all. So, and being sad. So you're just eating like junk food all day. Those are kind of the two scenarios that I tend to see. And then also too, making sure they're eating plenty of like anti-inflammatory, like high protein foods. Because the biggest thing when someone has an injury is that you want to protect their muscle mass. And again, you don't want to aggravate like any inflammation that might be happening from their injury. So again, plenty of protein rich foods and plenty of like antioxidants, antioxidant rich foods, plenty of fruits and vegetables, whole grains, like so this is, I always kind of frame rehab as like, this is an opportunity to improve the things that you have never had a chance to improve before. So if you never thought that your nutrition was important before, like, hey, this is a really great time to kind of sit down and help you get on a solid routine that you can take with you into the season.
Well, I can see them being, I would say, readily bought into your plan, because you're dealing with these players that are looking to improve their game by a matter of a fraction of an inch to be some of the greatest players in their sport. It's not like there's a tremendous room for improvement. They're just fine tuning it. So any little thing that comes their way that could up their game and enhance their performance that is legit, why would they not go with it? And nutrition is just key for that. So quick side note there, you mentioned anti-inflammatories. I'm thinking turmeric. What other anti-inflammatory ingredients would you tend to throw into somebody's diet?
Yeah, so turmeric is a great one. Something we always kind of tell athletes that you always want to have colors on your plate. So I think, and it's something I specifically see in baseball, that it's a very like supplement heavy sport. Like, and I think this is kind of something that athletes fall into a lot, is that they feel like it's easier just to take something, but typically the simplest solution is simply just trying to find the food version of whatever anti-inflammatory, whatever like vitamin or mineral you want to take, and see if you can get it from the food. Because typically when you put something in a supplement form, it's going to be what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to be in a form that's not as easily absorbed by the body. So whenever you can, if you can find the food version of, like you mentioned earlier, like calcium, magnesium, specifically with your antioxidant vitamins, so vitamin A, C, E, selenium, trying to get those from the food version, your body will retain it and absorb it better. So first step is just simply going to be every single meal and snacks, try to add more fruits and vegetables to that. Okay, if you don't like to eat them, okay, can we add like some spinach to your smoothies? Can you add vegetables into something that you do like already? And typically it's easier to eat it that way. Let's work on like your cooking techniques to make foods like taste more enjoyable. So as simple as it sounds, typically the first step is simply just getting them to try to eat more fruits and vegetables. And then from there, if we're either not able to do that, or just kind of depending on what the restrictions are through the day, then we can start talking about what supplements you can add in.
Got it. So colorful foods do not include Skittles, is what you're telling me.
No, no, definitely typically like try to get something that comes from the ground.
I didn't consider the youth level of a lot of your players, and of course, you're teaching them from the ground up. So it would make sense that you have to start with good nutrition 101, or even a
Mhm.
precursor like pre-K nutrition, we'll say. Where around here, I've got this friend who's a nutritionist, and she has these um, abbreviations for different types of food. The ones you want to stay away from are the crap foods, CRAP, which is conventional, refined, and processed. So we're going to stay away from that. And you really want to focus on soul food, which is sustainable, organic, unrefined, and local. How
Mhm.
does that sound to you? Is that a pretty good approach?
Yeah, I can definitely see like I think finding a way for helping people to remember like what foods are going to be great for them can definitely be beneficial. I think the thing where it gets tricky is that it just depends on the resources available to an athlete. So like for instance, a 16-year-old whose parents are buying their food for them, or when they go home in the off season and they just so I'll give you like an example. Like one of my sibling or one of my players, he's from Venezuela. And I think he said he has like 8 siblings. So when he goes home, the area of Venezuela he's from, like there's not a lot of resources around. So what is going to be healthy to him and what is kind of the resources he has available to him is like we're gonna have to work with that. So he might have to eat more packaged foods because that's what his family can bring into. Let's just make sure that we're trying to incorporate carbohydrates, protein, and vegetables and fruit at every meal if possible. So it really just depends on you have to kind of individualize nutrition to what resources are available to your player and where they're at.
And how many players are you basically planning for? Or do you do a lot of the cooking yourself, or are you just the strategic coordinator and you've got a team of culinary experts?
I would say I'm more of a strategic expert. So the way that it works, it kind of depends. It changes on each level that you're at. So at our Dominican Academy, it is like literally an academy. Our players are there 24/7 in season. So we have like a food service company that provides food for them, and then I write the menus. And then I just try to incorporate all the foods that they need. As well as I go once a month, like down there, and I spend time with them, and I will give them education on like why we're picking the foods that we're picking for them, as well as like the snacks that I'm picking for them. And I try to give them more opportunities to make their own food and own snacks like when they can. So that's what kind of our Dominican Academy looks like. In the States, last year I was based in Clearwater. This upcoming year, I'll be based with our high A team in New Jersey. So from there, again, we have different caterers that we work with and we write the menus for like what we want. And we strategically make our menus depending on like what our performance needs are. We do try
Can
to,
you explain that more? I'm
yeah,
curious about that. What do you mean?
yeah. So we again like just always including like plenty of like fruits and vegetables on the menus, like plenty of like high protein items. If it's like typically at an affiliate when you're kind of going through normal baseball season, we'll do like an arrival meal, pre-game meal, and post-game meal. So what each of those meals looks like is going to be a little differently. Maybe that arrival meal is going to be like, I guess you could say a little bit heavier, a little bit more like hearty, because that's getting them through all their training through the day, pre-game. And then versus that meal, like right before the game, like most players don't want something heavy. So we're just kind of giving them enough calories to get them through the game. And then post-game, again, it's kind of like the recovery. So it might be a little bit higher, like in anti-inflammatory foods, like post-training. We'll also do things like we'll try to have like uh fatty fish like 3 times a week, just to help again with like that anti-inflammatory response during mini camp. Again, like we try to match up meals. We'll try to plan meals on like recovery day. So if it's a day that's not as intense in training, we might have fish on that day again to help like the antioxidants, or the vegetables that we might pick or the fruit we might pick on that day are going to help with recovery. So different things like that.
And when it does come to supplements, are there preferred things that you would have in a supplement? Not necessary to name brand names necessarily. I'm not looking for any kind of company endorsements, but what are the things that if somebody were to take supplements that you're looking for? Is creatine and collagen, those type of things, or are there other
Yeah,
things?
yeah. So first and foremost, for like for really all professional athletes, whether it's going to be on a collegiate or a professional team level, specifically in MLB. Players cannot take any supplements that are not NSF for sports certified. And what that means is whenever a supplement has like third-party verification, specifically NSF, that's the highest standard of supplement verification. It means that essentially what having that mark means is that one, the supplement actually has in it like what it says it does, and then whatever the claims of the bottle are, or whatever the claims on like the product is, like there's scientific research to prove that it actually does that. Something that's really the reason why most dietitians, we kind of hesitate away from just using a lot of supplements is because a lot of supplement companies are not honest about what's actually in their product. You definitely can get cases of like cross-contamination. So typically when you see like players like, I don't know, popping positive on a drug test, it's because they probably take a supplement that wasn't certified. And maybe there was some banned ingredient in there that it shouldn't have been. And also too, or sometimes just some of the companies just don't do like what they say. Like, so for example, like testosterone boosters, like there are no actual testosterone boosters at work. So when I'm recommending a supplement to a player, it has to be NSF certified because that means it's actually going to have a chance of helping them. And obviously too, we're gonna look at, can we get it from a food first? But supplements that we always offer for guys and I think would be really beneficial for every athlete are definitely things like creatine, collagen, things like beta alanine, doing like nitric oxide, supplementation can be really beneficial as well. Electrolytes obviously are necessary, especially for our Florida-based and Dominican Academy-based players. Really everywhere, like hydration is important. But things like that, like those are kind of like the fundamentals that we start with.
Yeah, just being a small business owner with a training facility, I get approached usually through email, but also in person from companies that have supplements, whether it's vitamin supplementation, performance supplements. It just, the list keeps going on. I can only imagine how inundated your inbox and do you just get solicitations from all these different companies? How tiring is that?
I think it was worse when I was in the college setting, but again, because
Really?
yeah, but well, yeah, I think it was worse in a college setting, but again, like because I working at like some powerhouse schools like OU and NTCU, like whenever you're dealing with NCAA regulations are a little different than MLB, like or pro sport regulations for what you can provide supplement wise. We do get offers, but again, for MLB, like we literally cannot offer anything that's not NSF for sports certified. So that kind of helps cut down on it a little bit. But yeah, we definitely get quite a bit of offers for like supplements to offer guys. And if it's something that we feel like might be beneficial, then we'll do a trial run. But also too, a lot of things we look at is like kind of price versus like is it really worth it, right? Because anything that we're going to be providing to guys is something that they might want to buy and purchase for themselves in like the off season. So it's like, is this really something you need to supplement? Like that's really worth it for the cost? Or again, can you get this cheaper from the food?
Got it. Okay. On a personal side note, I've been to Norman, Oklahoma. I've been to the university there, and you went from Houston, Gulf Coast, beautiful, warm air, to Norman, Oklahoma. How was that?
It was, it's different. I will say being there, okay, so I guess to kind of explain the timeline a little bit better. So what happened is that I left Houston in 2020 during COVID to move back to Dallas for grad school. So from 2020 to 2022, I was in Dallas in grad school. So, and then I left Dallas in August of 20. Oh my God, time is like a vapor. I left Dallas in August of 2022 to go to Norman. And yes, it is very different. That was probably like one of the coldest winters I had ever like experienced. And I wasn't used to getting cold so early. So like in Texas, like it really didn't start to get cold until like January, like end of December. So by October, like waking up and it's like 30 degrees and the wind is just like blowing. I'm like, what? I was like, I don't think this is for me. Like this is
I love it. And well, you ended up in a good spot,
Yeah.
Florida, warm. You were going with players. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do. Let's take a break right now. We'll hear from Satanta College and Irish American University, and when we get back, I'll have this all set up in my kitchen. You can take me through a cooking lesson. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds great.
Just want to take a moment and talk to you a little bit more about Satanta College. These accredited programs, such as a master's in sports injury and return to performance, like I'm doing, or performance coaching, applied sport and exercise psychology, or even applied sports biomechanics and movement science, all accredited programs, master's programs at Satanta College. You can get 10% off your tuition with the code RS10. Check them out, satantacollege.com.
All right, we're back, and just got to throw on my apron here. Look like I'm in a real, actually, cooking show. It's Rock's Rotisseria, North Lake Tahoe. That's where I got it. I didn't steal it, like that big Black Bear diner mug. Grandma stole this one at the restaurant. I had to go back in and pay for it later. I didn't want to teach the kids that Grandma's a kleptomaniac, but whatever. Anyway, Akilah, we're going to start off with a little breakfast, you say?
Yes, we are.
So, okay, and we've got breakfast burritos on the menu here. So I've got, so far, I've got, I haven't chopped them up yet. I figure I could chop them as we chat, but I've got onions and peppers. I've got some little cherry tomatoes that I can slice up there. You told me to get some eggs. I've got spinach. I've also got some shredded cheese. And to make a real breakfast burritos, of course, I got my tortillas, and I've got some cilantro, and I've got some pico de gallo. So some chopped tomatoes, onions, and cilantro. So it's going to be redundant, but it's such good pico de gallo. I've got to put it in there. And how are you with spicy foods? Are you okay if I throw in some tapatio or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I can't do spicy. But there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just a punk. Like, I just can't do like spice at all. But yes, if you like spicy food, please. I'm all about making foods as enjoyable for you as possible.
All right. So with the onions, just chop them up, or are we going to do julienne? What are we talking? Remember,
I
was a line cook.
So I'm very big on dicing, and the reason why I typically tell guys to kind of dice them or cut them smaller is because, again, most of my players don't want to eat vegetables at all. So I find that cutting them smaller, they tend to like grill, like, or saute a little bit better, make it a nice crisp to it, and then the players will typically like them a little better. Or again, if they can't, yeah, they don't think about it.
Now, how often do you break away from your meal plan to accommodate their cultural differences when it comes to their food? Like, how much of Hispanic cuisine are we talking?
So we try to offer at minimum, like, we'll try to do like rice and like beans at every meal, because that is something that the players will identify with. In terms of like making like meal plans for the guys, we do provide them like with meals like 3 times a day. So it's like we want to provide them what they need, right? Like, nutrition is not one size fits all. There isn't such thing as like a perfect diet, or like this is like the only diet you should be eating that is healthy. There are aspects of every single culture that someone can eat and be healthy. So finding ways that you can use foods that someone identifies with and they're comfortable with to help them meet their goals is what I'm all about, and what the Phillies is all about as well.
I see.
Yeah.
When it comes to rice and beans, are they really a complete protein when you combine them together, or is that just something we've heard and we just accept it as the rule of law?
I think it's something, it is, to my understanding, and I could be wrong because I'm not the most like well versed at like plant proteins. To my understanding, I think when you put rice and like beans, or like rice and beans together, like you have more amino acids than you would if they're apart. But I'm honestly not 100% sure if together like that makes a complete protein. And then once you start going into like amino acid like concentration, or like percentages, like with like as comparison to chicken, like I always kind of remind people that you have to think of like your overall like calorie intake as well. So for athletes, like we try to tell them to aim for like 8 ounces of protein, like a meal. So how many calories you're gonna have to eat to get 8 ounces of protein from like vegetable sources versus like your like a meat source of it as well is something you have to consider. Not saying it's
Okay.
impossible, but like just kind of things you have to think about.
Cool. Very cool. Okay. All right. So I've chopped up some onions. I've got some bell peppers I chopped up. I threw a little cherry tomato action in there and chopped that up. I've got some eggs nearby. I'm heating up my little frying pan here, remembering that, of course, you know, there's listeners and not just viewers. So trying to give them a play-by-play. Now, when it comes to protein, we've got the eggs, but you also say, oh, we could throw some meat in there. So what I did in the spirit of true breakfast burritos is that I went with carnitas. And so basically some shredded pork, which is fantastic in burritos. That al pastor. Do you ever have lengua? Do you ever have tongue or anything like that?
I've definitely had lengua. So being from Texas, like I've grown up around a lot of like Mexican cuisine, and like lengua tacos are probably lengua and barbacoa. Those are probably my two favorite tacos.
Right on. Somebody just recently gave me some alligator jerky.
Really?
That was dang good. I know. Yeah, I bet you've had some in Florida. Is it around?
I've never tried it, but I mean, I would be willing to try it.
Girl, you don't know what you're missing. All right, cool. Okay, so how do you prepare your eggs? Are you going to fry them up or are you going to scramble them? What do you want to do?
So the way that I kind of do if I'm doing like a breakfast burrito is that I will typically scramble them. If it's a breakfast sandwich, I love a good over medium. But if we're doing breakfast burritos, I like to scramble them, and typically I will cook the veggies first, like get them nice and kind of, you know, sauteed, a little crisp on them. So I'll cook my vegetables down first. And then once those are mostly cooked or kind of cooked to how I like them, I'll crack the eggs into it and kind of cook it all together.
Cool. So glad we're on the same page there. Yep. Throw the veggies in. What's your take on like salt, pepper? Do you watch out how much salt intake you get there, obviously, but like any other spices or seasonings that you would throw in there?
Big garlic salt girl. I put garlic in everything. So garlic, if I'm going for more of like a Tex-Mex vibes, I might put some cumin in there as well. A little bit of chili powder, just a little bit, because like I said, I can't do too much spice. But yeah, things like that are definitely some things that I love to add into everything.
All right, throw in.
Another beauty of working with athletes and also being an active person myself, I don't really shy away from salt when I'm using it, because again, as we sweat, like we need to replenish those electrolytes. So I don't necessarily tell people to shy away from salt unless they have been experiencing blood pressure issues. And even with that, like I try to always focus on what we can add instead of what we have to take away. People tend to respond a little bit better with nutrition when you do it that way.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I like that. Yeah. Focus on what you can add rather than take away. Good. Yeah. So you're not depleting or restricting. Okay. Yeah. Now I've got the onions, peppers, tomatoes. They're kind of going on with a little garlic, a little pinch of salt and pepper. Should I throw in the carnitas now, or do you wait until after the eggs are cooked?
You can honestly do either one. If you like them to be all incorporated, you can kind of put them together. And also to kind of depend on how you're preparing this. If we're preparing to eat it right now, and then I think adding it all together is fine. But if we were maybe meal prepping this, then maybe keeping all these elements separate and then kind of putting them together the day of might be a little bit more beneficial.
Got you. Okay. Well, that's a good thought too. So basically I could have a whole bunch of containers in my refrigerator, and each morning that's when I'm going to assemble my breakfast rather than have them all wrapped up and thrown in the freezer or something like that.
Yeah, either one is fine. Again, athletes tend to have like super busy schedules. This is something I did a lot with my athletes when they were in college, is that they would batch cook everything on Sunday, put it in the fridge, and then they're ready to go. So both of these recipes we're going to be making today are ones that you can make on one day and either put it together the day of or just kind of have them ready to go.
Okay, so I'm just going to add some eggs now. And we'll get this all cooked up. Oh yeah, the family's going to love this.
Yes.
I would show off and crack the egg in one hand, but that'd be showing off. I don't want to do that.
I mean, I'm down to watch you show off. I would love to.
Okay, I'm just going to scramble them up, get that going there. And while I do that, I'm just going to chop up a little cilantro, and I'll get the tortillas heated up. Even the dogs are liking it. They're coming in from the other room after their nap. There we go. All right, we'll just put that tortilla there for now. Got
Another
some
thing you can do,
cilantro.
another thing
Yeah,
too,
please.
depending on how you like your tortilla, I like mine to be a little toasted. So sometimes I'll cook them in the oven. Like I'll kind of spray them with some olive oil spray. And I'll either cook them on the skillet or in the oven just so they get like a nice like toast to them, and then I'll kind of eat them that way. That
Nice.
being said, that kind of works a little bit better when you're cooking it like day of. Like if you were kind of meal prepping it, that might make the tortillas a little soggy.
Good point. Good point. Okay, so we're just going to throw this in my little convection oven here real briefly for a minute. There we go. All right. Beautiful. So, like, we've got Mondo burritos out here, a little bit bigger than the average. If you go down to Baja on a surf trip, which I often do, the burritos down there are just really, really small compared to here because we stuff as much in there, whether it's rice and beans, you throw in all this. Do you throw in rice and beans in your breakfast burritos?
Yeah, that rice and beans, or sometimes we do potatoes. I also am really big on if it's like a weekend guy, like always adding in the source of like healthy fat to all your meals. So putting in like some fresh avocado is also something that we'll do as well. Again, I think whatever with nutrition, like I know we kind of talked about separately, like what are your goals? So we've kind of made this ingredients to like kind of what would be like best for you, but you can really, really individualizing nutrition to fit the individual is something that is really helpful in helping someone achieve their goals.
Fantastic. So just to back up for a second, you put in a higher fat content for weight gain programs.
Yes, typically we try to add in like it's just because typically what people struggle with the most if they're struggling with gaining weight is like the volume that they have to eat. So again, trying to add in sources of healthy fats that are going to be higher in omega-3s are not going to help hurt them, and it will help them reach their calorie like their calorie goal.
Got it. Okay. All right. Here we go. We got my eggs, my carnitas, my peppers, onions with some tomatoes. I'll make this one for my son Jack. So he doesn't like spicy either. I'm just going to throw on a little bit of cilantro. Get a little plate here. I don't have any fancy garnish.
I would say this is a great time to add in your cheese so it can start melting. And then you're good to go.
Oh, cheese.
Yes.
Dang, thanks.
Don't forget the cheese. Yeah.
Wow, I forgot. Okay, got to get some cheese in here. Good point. Throw the cheese in right on top. Awesome. So how I fold burritos is from the side, both sides, and then I take the top and roll it right on, kind of claw it back with my hands, roll it right there. And then we
you are an expert. That's a beautifully wrapped burrito.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. All right. Well, he'll be enjoying that. Okay, so breakfast, we're just going to put this off to the side. Now we're going to get into something else for either lunch or dinner. When do you normally do like your rice bowls?
Yeah, so this could work for either lunch or dinner. I think typically most players, they're typically on their own like for dinner, just depending on when they're training in the day. So this can work for either or.
Okay, very cool. All right. And the snacks in between the major meals, is it just something that you have at hand for everybody? Okay, so basically 3 big meals a day with a couple snacks in between and a lot of hydration. Make sure they got a lot of electrolytes in there. Got it.
So again, it kind of just depends on what the player's goal are. If it's a weight gain guy, specifically if it's like a younger weight gain guy, so like someone that we're looking to try to put like 30 to 40 pounds on, because that is something that I've had to do like in a season. I tell them to aim for eating something like every 2 hours, and specifically like really focusing on like protein sources. So like protein and carbohydrates, you need both of those things together to help with muscle gain. So like every 2 hours. So for example, if you eat breakfast at 8 o'clock, you want to eat again by 10, eating again by 12 too, for like kind of setting reminders for yourself is something that people tend to be really helpful in helping guys gain weight. If it's someone that's maybe looking to like maintain weight, or we're just looking to support performance through the day, you might aim for a goal of every 3 to 4 hours.
And how easy is that for these players to maintain such a schedule? What kind of tools or tricks of the trade have you found that 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 allow them to be successful with that? Because that is a heck of a lot of food.
Yeah, it definitely can be challenging. So as a dietitian, that's one of the most important things that we do is we think about how to make food more accessible to these guys. So in every opportunity, everywhere that I can, I want to make sure that these guys have easy access to food that they can grab. So whether that be like at our Florida complex, like we have an entire filling station that has like snacks, like carbohydrate. We'll label our snacks if it's carbohydrate rich, if it's protein rich, if it's like a source of healthy fat, if it's anti-inflammatory, like we will label these things for them so that they know like what to grab and when. We also make sure that we have like plenty of ingredients for them to make their own shakes. So again, that's something that they can customize. And then we will provide 3 meals a day to them as well. So different things like that. And it's a lot of education with the players, like, hey, these are all of the resources we have available through like for you through the day, and this is how you use them depending on what your goals are.
Right on. Okay, so bringing the listening audience up to speed, we just made ourselves a nice breakfast burrito with carnitas and peppers and onions, tomatoes. We got some cheese in there, a little bit of salsa and cilantro. I do have a garnish. I'm just going to put a lime wedge right there. There you go. That's as pretty as I'm going to get with that. But now we're moving on to a rice bowl. And you've asked me to prepare a few things. One is I've got a pot of rice that I use. It's organic white jasmine, the rice that I have here, and it's nothing too fancy. I guess the fanciness comes in for my protein of choice. You were saying, oh, chicken or shrimp or beef or tofu, whatever you want, right? So I actually chose bulgogi, which is Korean kind of skirt steak, like marinated in Mama San's sweet sauce, and that's what I have going on here. I'm not a big sugar fan, but I do sneak in the sweet every now and then. It's usually in my sauces. So I've got a skillet of bulgogi going. I've got a nice pot of white organic jasmine rice. I do have some spinach, and I've got my chopped vegetables here. How do I prepare this? What do I do?
Yeah, so again, most of the heavy lifting is done because our rice is already made. And if are your vegetables cooked or not yet?
They're not, but I could make them cooked if you want me to.
I definitely recommend kind of like cooking them. So fun fact, most vegetables, specifically like if it's like a red color vegetable, you actually get those vitamins better when you cook them because they are absorbed better with like a fat source. So specifically using like some sort of avocado oil or like olive oil when you're like kind of sauteing them will help your body absorb the nutrients and the vitamins specifically that are in those better.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so then I'm going to get my frying pan all heated up here, my skillet, and you know what? I'm gonna grab some carrots also because I think that would work out well.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Yeah.
Okay.
So as many, like again, what I was kind of mentioning earlier, as many colors as you can include into your meals, like the better. We always tell our players to kind of eat the rainbow because typically the color of a fruit and vegetable is a really good indicator of what sorts of vitamins and mineral, what type of vitamins are in those vegetables.
Oh, fantastic. Well, then I've got red and white here with my peppers and onions. So I'm going to go with asparagus. Give me some green in there. Give me some good color.
Yeah,
there we go.
Awesome.
All right. Are you a fan of asparagus?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of asparagus. And ironically, so one thing that we've really tried to do with the Phillies again is as we're kind of encouraging our players like to eat more fruits and vegetables, and as they're getting used to having like dietitians present, we always include them like at every single meal. And like asparagus is ironically like, which we weren't expecting, is one of the few vegetables that our players will eat.
Yeah, they probably like to see their pea glow in the dark or something like that. That's why. There you go. All right. So I put it on a little bit of seasoning. I'm going to do a slight pinch of salt and a little bit of some ground pepper. There we go. The bulgogi is heating up nicely. I've got the rice going, and we're just going to let these vegetables go up a little bit more. Well, that was good. I'm glad you mentioned that. Cooking, it starts the breakdown process by cooking our food. I mean, that's probably why we're even here in terms of evolution to begin with, is the advent of fire and cooking our food. We didn't have to spend so much time rooting through the forest in hopes of getting what we needed, because the food broke down faster and we could spend more time doing other stuff like building cities. So cool. Not to get into anthropology too much, but it's kind of cool when you look at things like that. So I've got the veggies going right now, and I've got the bulgogi, I've got the rice. The one thing I didn't put in there is the spinach. Now, I don't know about you, but I save spinach until the end because it breaks down so darn fast. Do you do the same thing?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. Especially to, again, like if some people really struggle with like the texture of vegetables. So if they're like, again, like with peppers, if they have a little more of like a crisp on them, I tend to like them better. And because spinach has such a high water content, it can kind of disrupt that kind of like that process. So putting in spinach at the end might kind of prevent that.
Wow, really good call. I didn't actually think of that aspect. So that's cool. Yeah, we're very fortunate here where I live on the central coast of California in Santa Cruz County, where we're right on the edge of what we call the salad bowl, San Joaquin Valley. Some of the most of the produce that is sold in this country comes from here. So we've got farmers market. It's like you would not believe. I think there's only one day out of the week where we don't have a farmers market. What about your region where you are right now? Do you go to the farmers markets?
So in Florida, like I think there's definitely, we can get pretty great fruit. And it's also one of the things that I love about working in having an academy in the Dominican Republic. Like the fruit there is unreal. Like I have never had such like juicy like mangoes and like dragon fruit, you know, like, or like passion fruit, like fruits like those. And that's another thing too that's another point that I use as like a kind of a cultural lesson with my guys, like just kind of teaching them like, hey, like you have access to these foods that I honestly don't even have access to in the state that are super high in nutrients that you can add into your diet. Or like finding like what vegetables are like local to the area. So for instance, in the Dominican Republic, they eat something called tayota, which is like a squash. So that's something that I've started to include on the menu more because that's a local vegetable that the guys are familiar with. And then the more you can buy local, like the higher the nutrient content of the fruit and vegetable will be.
Yeah, I've been playing around with jackfruit lately. I had no idea. My wife's kind of like, I'm kind of over meat these days. Can we do something different, little plant-based stuff? So I'm like, cool. So I started doing jackfruit, and you can have it almost be like pulled pork. So I did some street tacos with her. Instead of carnitas, I just put the a little bit of sauce in, just some healthy sauce with the jackfruit, and it turned out she was blown away that it was actually jackfruit. Okay, I'm good. I've got my vegetables all sauteed up. They're kind of crispy brown with the little caramelization on the onions and a little bit with the peppers. I've got my pot of rice. So you generally do a little bit of a scoop of rice in the bottom of the bowl?
Yeah, so I will start with rice first. And again, serving size, again, kind of depend on what the player's goal is. A really easy way I find to visualize with players that we use what's called the athlete plate. So obviously we're putting this in a bowl, so it's a little bit different. But if it was like a plate, I always tell people to visualize their plate like a circle. And if it's a heavy training day, or if you're someone that is like trying to like gain weight, I always tell them to make like half of your plate carbohydrate food. So half of your plate like rice, the beans, pasta, potatoes, like whatever carbohydrate we're serving that day. And then your other half, you would do like a fourth of your protein and then a fourth like color. So that's a way to kind of visualize it. In this case, I think if we do like a scoop and a half, that's probably enough for what your goals that we discussed were.
I am loving you right now. I am just seeing some great food coming out of my kitchen. Okay, I'm just going to put after I got the rice in my bowl, should I put in my sauteed vegetables and top it with the meat? Do you have any preference?
It really doesn't matter, but I like meat. I typically do like carb, like your rice at the bottom, and then I do the meat because your meat is going to have that sauce on it, so it'll soak into the rice really well.
Ooh, gosh, you give me such great insight in this. Okay, so here comes the bulgogi. I got to tell you, this is some of the most tender meat that's around. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, and then I'm going to throw in my vegetables on top of there.
Perfect. And if you want to top it with like some more sauce, that's also something you can do. If you
Sauce,
like,
okay.
I love a good, like, again, we talked earlier, I like over medium eggs. So if you have the time one day, you want to put an over medium egg on top of it and like crack the yolk. That's another thing you can do.
It's like your sister from another mister. I love bibimbap. Are you familiar with the dish
Yes,
bibimbap?
I am.
Korean. It's like in Korea when there's leftovers in the fridge,
Mhm.
Mama-san puts it in a pan, cooks it up, and throws an egg on top. And so we've got some gochujang sauce here that we can put on there for a little warming spice. I like a fried egg on top of there. I might even throw in some chopped lettuce or some greens on top without cooking them and have it almost like the heat create the cooking process. I do like cilantro. I can't get away from it. And I did have a wedge of lime, so I'm going to sprinkle on a little bit of lime juice on top of that. And there we go.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Very much dietitian.
Oh my gosh. Look at you. I'm approved by a registered dietitian. I think I'm choking up because that's probably the first time that's ever been mentioned in my world. But Akilah, this has been fantastic. I can't thank you enough for giving me this cooking lesson. I'm loving the ideas and the fact that I can prep the foods in containers and then put them together. There's a saying up in New England that light dawns on Marblehead, and Marblehead's a town on the coast there. And well, this is a Marblehead of mine, and finally you've shed some light onto mine. And I've always just been putting it all together and then throwing it and into one container. But now I've got a different approach. If people want to, I'm sure you're coming up with like cookbooks and recipes online and all that. You've probably got a whole bunch, but if we want to follow you, say on social media, where can we go? Do you do any of that?
So right now, I don't have like a professional Instagram built out. That is something I'm planning in the future. But you definitely can find me on LinkedIn. Just Akilah Phillips, Philadelphia Phillies. And I usually do accept like most people's requests. Any social media accounts or like plans that I have in the future, like I will be announcing there.
Right on. Wow. Again, thank you so much for putting some time aside and giving me a little insight as to how you're fueling some of the major athletes in the sport of baseball. And I wish you well. And maybe we can have you come back on somewhere in the later dates, maybe near the end of the season or something, and give me another cooking lesson if that's cool.
Yeah, I would love that. Like I said, right now we are preparing for spring training. So I will be driving from Texas to Florida on Thursday. But yes, 100% after the season's over, I would love to come back and just kind of talk about like baseball and kind of what we do.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Zelos podcast. Thank you, Akilah and the Phillies organization for allowing this cooking class to happen. I'm just going to sit back with my little breakfast burrito and heat up my rice bowl for lunch. And meanwhile, get yourself to the kitchen and try these recipes out. We'll see you next week.